Well, there's this NGO I've been working with for a while now, and they work with victims of sexual exploitation and trafficking. And what they do is once they rescue these women, predominantly they're women and girls, they then take them to a rescue shelter home, try and rehabilitate them, do things like that, get them reunited with their families. I really didn't have a specific thought in mind. It's not that I went with any preconceived notion of making a film. I just went there saying, let me try and do something on them. Maybe shoot a small little documentary. I had a little time on my hands. Right. So I went. And in my interaction with them, it was just amazing that I started hearing so many different stories. And instead of stories of suffering and hardship, what kept hitting me repeatedly was the element of heroism. These women had been through hell and back. They had suffered emotional, physical and mental abuse. And when you actually looked at them, they were as normal as you and me. I'm sure the trauma was intense, but the fact that they could pull through something so vile and come out on the other side stronger and talk positively about making sure that it doesn't happen to another woman. This is what kept hitting me. And so I said, this is something that's pretty incredible. And then there was this one girl who very casually, muttered something, but said that her dad sold her, and this is what happened. And but when she was rescued, she mumble. I said, what exactly is she trying to say? So I spoke to the person who runs the rescue shelter home, and he said, you have no idea how amazingly brave this girl is, because she actually took her traffickers to court.
Wow.
And she won the case.
Wow.
Because
Amazing.
normally what happens is they get these girls out, and then the traffickers go scot-free, because
Right.
none of the girls have and it's not just courage, it's months of abuse as they're called into court repeatedly and asked them to relive their trauma.
Right.
So it was one of those things that, when I heard the story, I said, okay, that's what I'm going to latch on to. Now there's a story, now there's a movie, I can put the spotlight on something which is, truly heroic, and build a story around it. So like I said, keep saying, Lakshmi is a fictional account of many true stories. So I've borrowed from all these women, including Lakshmi, and
Created the character.
created the character Lakshmi.
And when it came to casting, how did you choose the people? I know you have put a singer in a role, which is very unusual. Although actually they do, in a sense, act, because they are always emoting.
Playback singers have to emote.
Right.
As opposed to, singers who put out private albums, they just go with their soul and feel and they perform. But playback singers, it's another acting job. It's
Right.
behind the mic. But in every, I think I mentioned it earlier too, I'm actually in the studio when they're recording, and I'm talking to them about the feeling, the thought behind it,
Right.
and stuff like that, and they translate it. Monali happened by accident. It was not at all on the cards. I don't cast like that. What had happened was, I actually originally came down to Hyderabad, and I cast a 14-year-old girl in the lead role of the 14-year-old. But the more I interacted with the parents, it became apparent to me that I was very, very uncomfortable. It just didn't feel right. Conscientiously, it didn't feel right that I would expose a 14-year-old to the
these
horrors
kind
of
yeah.
this profession. And it's all make believe. On the set we are pretending that that's the environment, but there is no way, especially in my kind of films where there's a fairly strong dose of realism even while we're shooting, that I wanted to expose this little girl to that. So even though I met with her parents and everything was fine, I actually dropped the project. And then about 6 months later, I was at a party, and I had no idea who Monali was, and I saw her walk in and sit down, and it was, people were jamming, it was a whole bunch of singers and they started singing, so I heard her sing and I was like, oh, this girl can sing. But then I was like, oh wow, if I put pigtails on her and I dress her up in the right clothes, I bet I could sell her as a 14-year-old. So almost the entire party I kept staring at her, which I was feeling weird, but I was trying to absolutely make sure in my head that she was right. So a little later I walked up to her. She knew who I was, and I said, do you want to are you interested in acting? She said, yeah. So I just let it be. When we started casting, I called her in for an audition.
Okay.
And she came in and her audition was terrific. So it was justified both in terms of the look and in terms of performance.
So, I mean, to our listeners and to our viewers, what would you tell about Lakshmi? I'm sure everybody would like to see it, and because you have a fan base, they'll definitely see it. But those who are not your fans, what would you tell them?
See, one of the things I've tried very, very hard in my entire career is to make sure that I don't repeat myself. Repeat myself story-wise, repeat myself thematically, repeat myself genre-wise. I try and mess around with different things. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised with Lakshmi, and I won't necessarily say pleasantly surprised, because it's an extremely hard-hitting film. We've been showing the film around to college campuses and people have found it disturbing, but my idea was very clear. Sometimes there are difficult topics, and we have to engage. There is no way that all of cinema can be used just to leave your brains outside the door, and
Right.
And especially if you're looking at cinema as a potential medium for social change. I think we have to take that little step of at least giving our 2 hours to watch the film, because I think this is a huge issue in India today. It's not something that can be swept under the rug.
Right.
And Lakshmi takes a look at one story, because if I tell you statistics, you'll just treat them as numbers and go home and forget about it. But if I show you what goes on in the life of even a single one of those girls, it'll make you want to stand up and do something. So I'm really hoping that while the subject matter might be difficult, that people, and more so women, come in and support it, because I think it affects a lot of them directly.
Right. And the tagline you've said, "Are you being human?" Can you just tell a little bit about how the tagline came about?
We were trying to see, again, the moment I say it's loosely based on a true story about this girl who was forced into prostitution, and then she, once rescued, came back and you hear that, you hear girl, prostitution, and immediately, you kind of take a step back. So we were trying to come up with something that would actually encapsulate my thought process for making the movie. And I remember when I was actually talking to these girls and hearing what the kind of experiences they go through, I was just completely blown away and affected by the inhumanity. I mean, I couldn't believe that one human being could do this to another, and it happens all the time. It's not like, I mean, wars are there. There are many things that are horrific.
And when you hear it firsthand, it's a different...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you actually stand across from someone and they're telling you what happened to them. And so I mentioned this to our whole marketing/design team, and then Chaitanya, who runs a design firm called Mantra, he came up with the line, "Are we being human?" which hits it right home, because it really encapsulates my thought process for making the film, and asks the viewer the question, because if it does mean that we are human, then we need to do something about it. And I'm not that I have any lofty ambitions with this film, but one of the reasons that we've been going around and adapting this fairly unique approach of showing it to college campuses is, I feel very strongly that if we show this film, and yes, if they spread the word, get the thing going, and it does well at the box office, great for us. But even if it doesn't, if it affects them strongly enough down the road, when they are in positions of power and positions where they can actually influence change and thought, that they will do something about it.
Right. I mean, actually by year 2020 it is said that India will have the youngest population in the world. So I hope that the
And
next generation gets affected by it,
and
at least
absolutely, traditionally, when you spoke about topics that were a little off the beaten track and stuff like that, the target always was the educated working consumer, the older person.
right.
And I've adapted a completely different tact. As a matter of fact, I haven't actively been catering to the 30s and 40s, which would directly coincide with, hugely coincide with my loyal audience. I've actually been going after the schools and colleges because
yeah.
I feel if there is any potential for change or for some kind of direct impact, I think it's there.
Well, I think at least let's hope that it'll engage people in discussing it and talking
Yeah.
about it, and I think that's the first step towards bringing a social change.
Absolutely.
So good luck with the movie, and we hope we'll all see it at Tharanga for sure.
Thank you.